All right, everyone, we're going to give it just a few seconds to let people come on and join us, and we'll get started with the presentation in just a bit.
Good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar, Try It Before You Buy It, Michigan's Competitive Proof of Concept, the 2022 Cronin Awards Gold Prize winning project. Thank you all for spending some time with us today. We're really glad you're here. This is the second webinar in our 2022 Cronin Awards webinar series. Be sure to check out our upcoming webinars. On Wednesday, February 1st, join us for our third webinar and learn about Tennessee's Supplier Diversity Interactive Data Dashboard. Then join us on Wednesday, February 15th for a look at Georgia's Procurement Officer Boot Camp. Registration is open for those of you who are in the webinar series. Visit www.naspo.org to register. You can find the registration on the webinars tab on the left side of the page. We look forward to seeing you there. At the close of today's presentation, you'll be asked to complete a very brief questionnaire. Your feedback is very valuable to us here at NASPO. Today's presentation is good for one contact hour towards your continuing education credits, or CEUs. To get your certificate, simply complete the questionnaire following the presentation. Before we begin, I'd like to take a moment to explain the format of today's webinar. All attendees are muted. You can enter questions and comments in the chat box. If you would like to ask our presenter a question, you can type it in the Q&A box at the bottom of your window. Questions will be addressed during the Q&A session after the presentation. I will be one of your hosts today. My name is Elise Gillum, and I am part of NASPO's research state and federal levels. I'm also very pleased to introduce our speakers today. We are very honored to have with us Steve Davis, the Relationship Management Division Director with the State of Michigan's Division of Central Procurement. He is a graduate of Thomas Cooley Law School and has been with the State of Michigan over 20 years. Steve is the creator of the competitive proof of concept solicitation that we'll be reviewing today. We also have Joe Ernst, the Senior Supplier Relations Specialist with the State's Division of Central Procurement. He is also from Michigan. Very grateful to have both of you.
Thank you for having us.
All right, and I already started off with a fail to unmute myself, so we're off to a rousing start. Good job, Joe. All right, well, unless there's anything else, I'm gonna jump right into it. First slide here is the stock slide from NASPO. In the unlikely event you're joining a NASPO event for the very first time, that's what NASPO stands for. So you don't have to ask and be embarrassed. Now you know. This is also one of their stock slides with our information in it. So this will be the last slickly produced slide that looks very nice, but this is the introduction. Our presentation will be on our competitive proof of concept solicitation, the electrifying title, Trying Before You Buy While Complying with Competitive Requirements. I'm sure I've got you all hooked now. We're very excited to hear what we got coming on, or what we got going on here in the state of Michigan. So let me get right into it. I am going to do this presentation somewhat like an origin story because I'm a bit of a nerd and I like to do things that make presentations a little more fun. So we'll get some of the boring stuff out of the way, but this is the origin of the competitive proof of concept solicitation. As anyone on this line knows who's joining, public procurement is a very different animal than that in the public sector. This is important. We want transparency. We also want to be good stewards of public funds. However, it's not always the most efficient. And it doesn't always give us the best possible opportunities that there might be. There are often legal requirements that can't be met that can preclude us from doing some things that would be ultimately very, very beneficial. And that is the genesis of the CPC solicitation. Legal requirements in Michigan dictate the need for competitive solicitation in almost every public procurement. That should come as no shock. That is very likely commonplace for most states and the feds, and even local and municipal jurisdictions. For a long, long time, that was misinterpreted, meaning the statute itself was misinterpreted to suggest that only requests for proposals and the like were the methods of solicitation that one should use in state procurement. As I mentioned at the onset, these of course have their utility, but there are shortcomings as well. One in particular, from my perspective, where I sit in the state, is in the realm of IT, and in particularly when we're talking about new and novel technologies. Again, I'm not saying anything that nobody has ever heard, but the pace of technology is very fast. New solutions are being rapidly developed all the time. In Michigan, some of the more complex IT solicitations take up to a year, sometimes even a little more, from genesis to completion of a contract. Well, what might happen in the world of technology in that time? What you're bidding on could, in theory, already be mostly obsolete in some situations. And what we discovered was, particularly again in the realm of IT, there were many vendors, particularly in the space of like off-the-shelf type software or other solutions that would offer free trials of new products. Of course there are. They do this in the private sector all the time. Why wouldn't they make these things available to the public and possibly get the benefit of having government contracts? But our original interpretation of the statutes makes that impossible for us. We, as a public entity, could not, in our reading, avail ourselves of this type of thing. My first this plays. Oh, I had a just like at the annual, I had a audio visual multimedia extravaganza ready for you, and my sound is not playing. Oh, that is a bummer. Well, I was playing the Avengers music here to go with the origin story theme. Unfortunately, it's not working for me. So the hero you need. The first bullet point just says CPC. And you'll hear me say that throughout. And of course, that's just our shorthand for the competitive proof of concept. We live in a world of short terms and acronyms. We have RFPs, RFQs, ITNs, we have various solicitations, and we identify them essentially by their acronyms. Obviously, I don't state out competitive proof of concept all the time. So as I'm saying CPC, that's what I'm referring to, and it is the basis for this presentation. Obviously, if this was something your state was interested in doing, you'd name it whatever you want. Maybe you'd give it a niftier acronym that was a little cooler, but that's what we got. It is, in fact, a formal competitive solicitation process. And by that, I mean it is sent out, not necessarily for bid, but in practice, sent out for bid in the same way and manner we do any other solicitations. Unlike asking for somebody to show us what they can do in terms of a contract, we're actually looking for a demonstration, some product that we can get our hands on, try, look at, see how it works, or any solution that we might not know about that the particular vendor community might have that they think might fit our needs. And what we do in these situations is we have a short evaluation period, usually a month or two, a pilot program, if you will, where we'll try the product and get end users and stakeholders to use the product. And if in fact we find value, we can then enter a contract with them. If not, we don't have to. And that's made very, very clear at the onset. There is no guarantee of a contract. I can state, I don't know if anyone or many of you who are listening today were at the national conference and heard us go through this. That was a big an area of concern. A lot of people brought up, like, well, what happens if you decide not to go into a contract? Are they going to be pissed? Yeah, maybe. But ultimately, it's very clear. It's laid out at the onset of any agreement. This is not a guarantee of anything. We want to see if this works for us. And at the end of the day, this meets the requirements of the Michigan Management and Budget Act. Holy segues, Batman. Let's talk about the most electrifying and interesting thing we're going to talk about in this presentation, and that is codified statutory law. All right, I'm sure everyone at home is thrilled. I will get through this relatively quickly, and there's a reason I'm going through this the way I am. So our Management and Budget Act is codified. I've provided a citation here in the extraordinarily unlikely chance you want to look at it and read what we have on the books in Michigan. And another thing I did in preparation, I just looked at some of our neighbor states. I looked at the Ohio Revised Code, the Indiana Code, and what I believe is the Illinois Codified Statutes. I believe that's what that stands for. And while there are certainly differences in the language, while there are certainly different procurement opportunities and types that vary from state to state in nature and language a little bit, by and large, what I'm seeing, and this is a small segment, obviously, but everything I've been led to believe is that most states operate on a fairly similar basis. Certainly the feds do as well. And that is, you require competitive solicitations once the amount of the good or service or IT product exceeds a certain threshold. So where we sit, that's most of our very large, very expensive contracts. And that seems to be consistent throughout. So ultimately, the CPC solicitation is run procedurally very similar to any of our other solicitation methods. And with that being said, and the reasoning as to why I'm looking at state law and comparing it to other state laws is the reason I think this is a valuable presentation that you can take something important from that you might be able to use in your state, and that is that transferability is a snap. If you've participated in the Cronins in any capacity, whether drafting or just listening to them, you will know that there are always essentially 4 pillars of the Cronin. You show why your new thing from your state gives you is an innovation, why it is a service improvement, and why it can help you with some cost avoidance or other savings. The final pillar is essentially what I think is the most important in terms of doing a presentation is transferability. If you have all those others, you've got this wonderful radical solution that is revolutionizing state procurement, but other states or municipalities cannot legally avail themselves of that. They've got some obstacle in the way. Well, what good is it ultimately? Hey, good for you, state of Michigan. You've done this great thing and your citizenry is well served by it. We can't do that in our state. Based on my review, I think it's highly unlikely that in your state, you could not. I could certainly be proven wrong, but I think that the language is always flexible enough that you could do something similar. The real trick is looking at your language in your laws, seeing where those obstacles might be, and then tailoring the language to meet those needs. From what I've seen in looking over some laws from other states, I don't think much tailoring is needed at all, frankly. And with that, I kind of want to jump right into the solicitation document itself. One of the really strong, one of the strengths of this, of the CPC, and particularly as it relates to the Cronins, is again, I think transferability. And in our case, I think the transferability is as simple as sharing with you our template. I'm going to talk a little bit about it, but because, as we mentioned at the onset, Steve created this thing. He's certainly more expert than I, and I'm going to let him walk through this a little bit. But basically, what we have is an 8-page solicitation template. It's much smaller, much more efficient than most of our RFP templates, which range from 40 to 50 pages in most instances. And being the technological whiz that I am, I was not really able to embed this full document into the slideshow itself. So I'm going to go ahead and drag over this Word document, which I sure hope you're all seeing now. Well, Steve, nod at me or say yes if you're saying, hey, all right, go me. And then I'm actually going to shut up for a couple of minutes and let Steve go. And Steve is going to just kind of walk through at a very high level, what is contained in this solicitation and what it can mean to you and how you might be able to utilize it. And Steve just yelled at me to flip through the pages when you get to that point.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. Yeah, one of the things that we wanted to do when putting together the templates for our competitive proof of concept is we kind of wanted to try out some ideas that would make the process faster, such as limiting how long the statement of work that's attached to it is, and also limiting responses. We've also got, if you want to scroll down, Joe, much more kind of purposely subjective paperwork to walk through. We require everyone to actually write out reasons for this, but it's, even though there is scoring, it's not the traditional scoring you might be used to. And the basic idea is to set this up so that we can pick one or more vendors to do the actual proof of concept, which then can be reviewed, and we can decide whether or not if we want to go to a full contract, full implementation contract with everyone or not. And can keep scrolling, Joe. We give some consideration to whether or not they offer an estimate of what the full implementation would be up front. That isn't required, since we don't always know what full implementation would look like. And you can keep scrolling through, Joe. I think that's maybe that's pretty much what I wanted to talk through on this document.
All right, well, then they're stuck listening to me some more. Sorry, everyone. Anyway, to piggyback on kind of what Steve just went over with the document itself, as he said, it's smaller and more efficient than the typical RFP. And like I said, going into that, the document that we just showed, which is certainly available, we can always share it. I'm pretty sure it's on our websites. You wouldn't even have to ask us. You could go find it and download it. If not, it's something we're more than happy to provide. And I know we've already given it to the good folks at NASPO. So even if we changed our mind, they could give it to you contrary to our will, in the unlikely event that were to happen. But it's very short. It's, like I said, the template itself is just a few pages long. It is active in its discouragement of long statements of work. And that is primarily because we don't know what we want. It's one of these, it's a solicitation where we really get to, hey, dazzle us, show us what you got. If there's a solution, obviously we generally have some idea something's out there. We don't just bid out and, hey, we want to do X. Anyone in the world, can you do something about that and help us? There's usually a little more specificity than that, obviously. But we don't have to pre-draft a proposed statement of work. We don't have to, what's the word I'm looking for? We don't have to put it in there and have them be stuck to the terms as we've drafted them. It really opens it up to creativity. One thing, and I believe Talise confirmed this with me when we were preparing ahead of time. I know the state of Michigan, if a vendor helps in the preparation of a solicitation document, they are immediately disqualified. And Talise mentioned to me she believed that to be the case in most, if not all, states. So while that was actually very helpful, let's get experts in to help us define what we want. We can't do it. In this case, they're not proposing they're not helping us prepare. They're just saying what they have. So it in a way, it almost has an aspect of a request for information. It's something that we call a request for an RFI. I don't know what other states have for that, but it's built into the process. So you get the benefit of that along with the same conceptual end result that you get from an RFP. And then, of course, there's no need to negotiate pricing up front. We're almost always asking for something to be free or very low cost. So, like Steve mentioned, we will typically want to know, all right, you're letting us do this now for free or low cost. What's it going to cost if we blow this out to the whole state? But ultimately, you don't have to negotiate that up front. You can kind of get an idea of what you're getting into before you get into it. The biggest obstacle linguistically that was faced in drafting this and creating this was, of course, the competition piece. Again, state procurement, we have to have a competitive process. It has to be very open. We put it into our ERP system, and anyone in the world who might be interested has the right to submit a bid. And so that's where you get that competition piece. And theoretically, that's always going to provide the best possible value, because people are going to try to undercut each other. They're going to try to do more for less. Whether that works in practice or not is a whole other discussion. But competition is key. What's really nice about this, and again, Steve said this, but I definitely want to expound upon it, is the evaluations can be much more holistic, much more subjective. I came to the state not having any procurement background, but as any human being who's ever bought anything, like a consumer electronics, I know that I'm always looking for a best value. It doesn't always mean the cheapest. It doesn't always mean a certain level of quality. It's what's best for me. RFPs don't always allow you to do that. You're often kind of constrained. Well, this is what we thought we wanted. This person made the best proposal based on what we thought we wanted. We're kind of stuck going with them now. This gives you the opportunity, because you might get radically different types of proposals in your CPC that can allow you to look at this more subjectively while still following what is typically a very objective process. And that, we believe, leads to better outcomes. So where I kind of want to go from here is to give a couple examples of CPCs that we did and the results we had. This is actually very similar to if you did happen to see this presentation at the annual conference. I apologize, there's kind of the same, but then we're going to go into some other ones that were just kind of taking flight and provide some updates. And I think these are really good because they show its utility, which is of course the purpose of this, but they also show you its flexibility. How many different types of things that you might not have thought of where a solicitation of this type might be of value to you and your state. I see a question and answer box. And so if it's all right, I don't know if, sorry, I forget the process. Should I just go ahead and, I can see the question. Should I just go ahead and read it, or do you guys want to jump in now?
I'll go ahead and read it, Joe.
Okay.
That's okay.
Yeah, I already warned our good friends at NASPO. I talk loud, fast, and without abandon. So sometimes getting a word in edgewise with me can be a little bit tricky. So and Steve's smiling. I bet he wants to nod his head vigorously. But yeah, go ahead, Talise. I'm happy to kind of.
So one of our anonymous attendees has asked, did you have to get special rule approved to allow use of the CPC?
Not necessarily a special rule. We ran it by our attorneys in the Attorney General's office, and they agreed that it was legal. And so we pushed it through our normal policy process. So nothing special.
And while Steve is certainly in a much better position to talk about the specifics, again, I'd say that leads into some of what I spoke about earlier, where it's really about carefully reading your own statutory language and then thinking about how you might have to draft this. You don't have to have lawyers. I mean, it helps that we are, but I don't think that's even necessary. And anyone with a little bit of analytical reasoning can kind of look at your laws as they're written, look at your current solicitations, and I think fashion this in a way that unless there's something that specifically said, like the state of X shall under no circumstances ever engage in any sort of solicitation that allows you to try free samples. That one could be a little tricky to work around. I just don't think that's out there. I think you're looking more at language that's like ours. And so what we've drafted so far takes into consideration the existing language. And then really you just have to get executive buy-in at that point. I don't think there's anything that you'd have to do procedurally. Again, could vary from state to state. We're always happy to sit down and talk to you about it. But I digress. Hopefully that answered the question to some degree. So I'll move on unless there's any follow-up from that. The first example, and really kind of where it all got started for us, is the DNR body cameras. For our DNR, our Department of Natural Resources, was essentially looking for body cameras for their field officers. Michigan is fairly renowned for some of our militias, particularly in the north and in our Upper Peninsula. The UP up there is kind of, like I said, it can be infamous for some of the wackos that hang out up there. I believe I have read, it's been a while, but I believe that in terms of actual danger of physical harm, our conservation officers have one of the most dangerous jobs out there. They're often going out into very isolated circumstances with people who are typically well armed, don't particularly love the government, and well, we'll leave it at that. Body cameras have become fairly ubiquitous in society with law enforcement over the past 5 to 10 years. So it just makes sense, right? We want to have our DNR officers, we want to have them have body cameras for their own protection and for the protections of the citizens. It's a win-win-win. Nobody loses in that scenario. Obviously, if you want body cameras, they're physical, tangible objects. There's a commodity. There's some IT component because it's storing that, because that becomes evidence in court cases. There's filing systems that, and we're going to talk about that a little bit, but you might have organization systems that are keeping that evidence somewhere. So it's a pretty big, it doesn't sound like much, but getting those body cameras is a pretty big lift. And so what we found was somebody had actually offered a very novel solution to us, and that was a system that did not require body cameras. It would take the officers' existing cell phones. They already had state issued phones. It was an app, I believe. So as simple as something you download onto your phone, and then it would take your phone's camera, turn it into a body, use that, your ability to use it as a video camera. They could then clip it on, use it like a body camera. And essentially what you were paying for at that point then, besides the app, was the licensing, the storage, the ability to manage that data. DNR didn't know how many body cameras they needed. How much storage does that equal? I don't think anyone going into a solicitation for such a thing says, oh yeah, I know that if we have X number of conservation officers, we're probably going to need Y number of teraflops of storage to capture all their body camera data and then keep it for a certain amount of time. There's a lot of unknown there. And so that becomes a very difficult contract to draft a statement of work for, then to negotiate, and then to try to get the best price. So that's example one. And I'm going to get to the results in just a minute, but I'm going to go through both examples first. This is a totally different example. This was our Secretary of State in Michigan. The Secretary of State, amongst other things, is the administrative body responsible for driver's licensing. So one of everyone on earth's favorite thing is waiting in line at their respective Bureau of Motor Vehicles to get their license renewed. Happy birthday to you. Here's a burden and a long wait in line. So Michigan Department of State wanted a solution for virtual queuing systems. And ultimately what this was an AI system that would allow you to check in online, know how far back you are, essentially how many minutes until you were at the front. And that way you could go in, not be taking up space in a crowded, angry room with a bunch of other people who don't want to be there, and get right in line, get your driver's license renewed, and get out of there quickly. Great idea. but again, one of these things that, well, everyone's on board with that. No, that's something that everyone can be happy that their government is doing for them. You're gonna make me get the driver's license every year or every 4 years, make it fast, make it efficient. And so we did bid one out. It started as a regular bid. We had a vendor and it worked for a little bit. And then frankly, it crapped out on us. And while we tried very desperately to get that system to work, it made the papers, which makes no one happy, particularly the Secretary of State. And since our office administered that contract, it caused some problems. And I see we might have a question coming in, so I'm happy to pause.
Andy Doran asks, what does the actual demo process look like? What happens if you decide not to proceed with the first responders that enter the process?
The demo process really depends on what's being demoed. We've done anything from a few weeks to multi-months where there is a pilot program going on. And we can run more than one at the same time, and we are not required to go with anyone that's done a demo. We could go back out to bid if we wanted. So we make it clear that there is no guarantee of a full implementation contract, and we kind of have made it clear that we can go with whoever we feel provided the best proof of concept during that phase, or if there's just one, we feel that it's a good proof of concept.
And to add on to that, I think I'll actually answer that question even further with examples, both in this one and in a couple of the upcoming examples I'm going to give. Very specifically, for this particular situation, and I was going to get to this in results, but no sense in, I'll let the cat out of the bag, right? What they did here is they actually took one Secretary of State branch to run this machine learning system. So it was really only available to somewhere, I believe, in Wayne County, it wasn't Detroit proper, but it was outside of Detroit. So a busy one, but not their busiest one. And they, I believe, did it for, I can't remember if it was a month or 2 months, and it didn't work. It ended up not fitting in. I don't know, the AI wasn't, well, I'm not going to try to speculate. I know that the people who were evaluating it were looking at it. They were looking at wait times. They were looking essentially how many complaints they got. So they got real-time evaluation of the product from a small subgroup of the state, because again, we didn't implement it throughout. It was one branch location out of, there was a time I knew how many it was, but there are a lot of different Secretary of State branches throughout the state of Michigan. We're almost 10 million people. So I guess do the math in comparison to your own state is probably roughly proportional. But it didn't work out. But the question was more about, well, what's the implementation like? In this case, they evaluated several. I want to say at least 6 people had a virtual queuing solution. So I think 6, by that I mean 6 people actually bid, and they really liked one. They were real excited about it. They were sure, yep, we're gonna end up going to a contract with this group. And they tried it and it stank, or it just didn't meet their needs in one way or the other. So that was the evaluation. And I'll go a little more in depth into the results unless there's further questions. I think there's one. One.
Yes, there is.
Very good.
Andy also asks, is going back out to bid the only option if you decide not to proceed, or can you move on to other responders from the initial solicitation?
We could move on to other responders if there were other responders, if we so chose. That would also be an option.
Yep, and that's in the solicitation again, right? One of the things I see, and I both me and Steve, and we work in our procurement office, but we're not in the sourcing side. Our office is differentiated a little bit that way. So I do a lot of different just review and kind of give my opinion on things. And one of the things I'm very big on about this is you basically really tell any prospective bidders, you really do a good job of setting expectations in the onset, right? Like, you might do this, you're going to spend time, you're going to give us a product for free or cheap. You might get no product. We might not pick you. We might try yours, not like it, try someone else's, like theirs more, and then end up having it being in a contract with them. But it's all spelled out front. Again, that's that public procurement. There's transparency. It goes through our system. There's the checks and balances of our typical how we put something through our ERP system. So there's records of everything we do. And so the short answer, and that's why Steve is much more efficient than me, and he said, yes, of course we can. That's probably the more satisfactory answer, because it's short, sweet, and efficient. But ultimately, if it doesn't work out, we can go back out. Hopefully that answered the question. If not, you certainly feel free to ask for more clarification. But with that, I'm actually going to go on to the results. I'm going to start with the DNR. Here's one that I found to be wildly successful. Everything about it, for me, as somebody who had very little to do with the process, who just sees how it worked and here are the results. I think this is great. I think this is something that I wish government were doing more often as a taxpayer. The full solicitation, and this was, even though it has a lot of, actually I take that back. I think it started less in IT and more in commodities, because they were actually looking for body cameras. Because of this solution is almost exclusively IT, ended up being an IT solicitation. And that first bullet point says a lot to me right off the bat. Did the full solicitation and then contract execution in 73 days. Now, I'm going to qualify that there is a year gap, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So there's also a year where we tried the product, and that's a good thing. But ultimately, the time for solicitation and contract execution is 73 days, which is, I don't know how fast your states are doing IT solicitation and contract executions. That's very fast for us. That's way better. That's better than our SLAs and better than what we do most of the time. We did end up executing a full 5-year implementation contract for it. As I mentioned before, we get that first year completely free. What I love about it is it right-sized the contract. You heard me mention when I was talking about it that you get storage, right? The part of what they were selling is storage, and part of what they and part of how they package it is in tiers. If you need this much storage, it's this. If you need this much storage, it's a little more, and so on and so forth. How do you know what that's going to look like? This allowed us to right size it. And I see another question, so I'm happy to pause.
We have another anonymous question. Do you require confidentiality terms with the vendor on the front end? For example, an NDA or BAA or other type of data protection terms? And do vendors ever object to that because POC is free and then they would refuse to sign or negotiate the confidentiality terms?
Oh boy, that's a very thorough, or there's a thorough answer to that question that probably would take up more time than we have. I want to take a quick stab at it, Steve, because I think I can give a quick and dirty answer, and it's something we can always talk to you more about later. All of our standard solicitation templates now have, when you're talking about confidentiality, right, you're talking two ways, right? There might be a situation where you're using state data, and so you need to make sure you're not sharing anything of ours. But then, especially in these sorts of situations, hey, this is a new solution we're shipping around. We don't want you disclosing anything. So there can be, in fact, there are often, well, I don't say often because we haven't actually done that many of them, but you could certainly do even mutual covenants where there's NDAs going both ways. We have form language about, by the virtue of you as a bidder bidding on anything through a public process, everything you submit could be FOIA. You get to the Freedom of Information Act. So we have something they sign right off the bat, like we want this to be held confidential. You can use that same process for the CPC, for the vendors protection. I'm trying to think if we've had of the solicitations we've done, if we've done anything where there was certainly the queuing system had to have had some personal identifiable information, as it was driver's licensure. That's a great, I don't know exactly what we did. I don't know if Steve, do you by any chance? Don't want to like.
I mean, it's going to depend on what's being purchased. If there's something that would require a non-disclosure agreement on the part of the vendors, we would include it. But it isn't standard practice.
Yeah, and I would just add, like, we have, and I'm sure, you know, anyone listening today probably has the same thing, right? You have standard terms and conditions, legal terms that your respective attorneys general have drafted for every one of your contracts. And obviously a big one for us is data privacy, data protection, data security. And like I said, I guess where the rubber meets the road, I'm thinking about the ones we've done, and the only thing I can think of where there would even have been that circumstances yet is the driver's license one. But even then, the more I think about it, forgive me, this is developing thought based on the question, I don't know that they even had access to that, because it was really just, hey, put me in line. So it was a name. I don't think they had to, I don't know that they had to give their birth date, or certainly not their social security number. I guess the most unsatisfactory answer I could provide is we got legal terms for all of it in a regular solicitation, and there's nothing wrong with implementing that in a competitive proof of concept, because at the end of the day, all it is a templated boilerplate solicitation that we use, and we can add other boilerplate language to it to help us meet our needs. So yeah, I don't know that that's the most satisfactory answer, but that's, I guess, best one I can give you. The last thing I was talking about with the DNR body cameras, it says saved a modest but appreciable $2,500. And I'm almost positive that's 100% related to picking the right level of data storage that we need. So, you know, on the grand scheme of state budget, that's not huge. But also keep in mind, we got this product for free. We did not have to buy any body cameras. We were able to use technology that we already had and essentially do something that we didn't know existed, using an app and cell phones that they already had to provide a much needed product for our DNR. And so I just have always really kind of had a soft spot for this one in particular. It's nothing totally revolutionary, but it really kind of demonstrates what you can do with this sort of solicitation, I think, very well. MDOS is a completely different end result. Right? It's a failure. We didn't get a good product or something that we can use. And we actually paid for this one, as you see it here. We paid $20,000, and I want to say it was 2 or 3 months that we put this thing through its paces. So you could say, well, you wasted $20,000. And I would say yes, but also think about cost avoidance. And it's hard to tell just how much you save in cost avoidance. Sometimes that can be very hard to quantify. The solution that we had in place that ultimately broke down, I want to say, don't quote me on this, it's all public record. If I'm wrong, we can yell at me later, but I want to say it was a $600,000 a year spend for the statewide system. We were looking to implement something that was at least that much, if not a little bit more. And it looked great on paper. And the people at the Secretary said, like, this is a game changer. We love this. I remember those discussions because I was involved in the issue, resolving the issue with the original vendor, and they were really, really excited about it. But when they got their hands on it, I was like, oh, this actually doesn't work. So think about how that might fit into your role and what you do in your states, because if you're working with agencies and they really, really want something, you know, is that based on, hey, they know what they're getting into, or they're just really dazzled by the sales presentation? So I think that despite the fact that this didn't turn out as a win in terms of a good low-cost contract that was achieved, I think that cost avoidance and saying, hey, this thing that we probably would have contracted for and wasted a lot of money on, we didn't. So I find that to be very valuable. Oops. Help if I scrolled the right way. So with that, I'm going to get into, I'm going to talk a little bit, give you some updates on some of the current projects. Once again, I'm going to reference the annual conference. At that time, we had 4 in flight. Since then, we have added another one. So these are the 5 different current projects we have that are in the early to middle. Well, I shouldn't say that. Some are farther along. Some of these are going to be contracted pretty soon, but we have 5 additional projects that have gone through the CPC process. This first one, I'm actually going to talk about a little bit about with some updates, and that is this active navigation tool. It's essentially an AI redlining solution, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. The third one is fairly self-explanatory. It's a legal case management system. We found some really good value there. The fourth one is the one of the most interesting ones we've done. And while there's still a lot of work to do on it, it really shows the breadth at which you can utilize this type of solicitation. And while I don't have one for the final one, I'm putting it on here because this reverse auction company, we actually sat in with a supply chain guy at Michigan State University, one of our academic partners, and his whole dissertation in the field was public procurement utilizing reverse auctions. From what I understand of the sourcing folks, that's sort of maybe an antiquated nation. We've all heard of them, but who uses reverse auctions anymore? I don't know where that's going, but I suspect this is going to be one of our Cronin submissions in a year or two. So keep your ears open for that. But I did say of these 5 that are current and active, there's 3 that have some pretty interesting updates that I think are worth sharing. And again, I think for illustrative purposes, you can see kind of what you can do with the CPC and some of the benefits that Michigan has realized by taking advantage of this. Bear with me, I'm gonna take a sip of water real quick. So the active navigation system that I mentioned is ultimately what it is it's an AI data analysis tool, and it's near and dear to my heart because it's for our office here in central procurement. What it does is looks at when our buyers are in negotiations and actually trying to finalize contracts with the vendors, and the vendors send back redlined versions to whatever degree they have redlined certain terms. We always have to kick that up to our AG to review. Our AG is swamped. Sometimes their ability to look that over and provide an opinion on why it should be okay or shouldn't be okay, or why we should resist. It could take weeks to months of extra time in negotiating contracts while we're waiting, depending on the weight and the nature of the red lines that are there. What this is going to be is an AI tool that looks at it, says, hey, they scratched out your indemnification clause. Surprisingly, many companies, when we're in the negotiation process, try to axe our indemnification clauses and then try to put their own in that wildly benefit them. And our AGs don't like that at all. And where I sit in our office, I don't like that at all either. No, we don't do that. In fact, the state of Michigan, it's contrary to what's in the state of Michigan's constitution. So we don't indemnify anybody. And if you want the state to do business with you, you got to deal with it. That's non-negotiable. Now, obviously, that's a stock term. We know where to look. We can see if they've redlined it pretty quick and pretty easy. We can say, no, that's not going to work. But ultimately, what this does is it's a machine learning tool that goes in there and says, okay, here's what they redlined, summarizes it. This should be okay. We don't need it in this kind of contract. And it is hopefully going to save us a ton of time. And of course, time is money, so money as well, in having to kick things up to our AGs for review and letting our buyers kind of do a little bit more of that negotiation with having a legal, having the legal expert be AI. So to all you lawyers out there who might be listening, good riddance. We're obsoleting you with this tool, and that means me too. So better hit the job line and see what we can do. But I'm really excited to see what it can do because it's just interesting to me. And for us, we got to utilize a tool that, and I think we only had 2 bidders on it. We tried one, liked it. We paid $10,000 to use it for a month, and they liked it. They liked the terms. They liked the price. They liked the functionality. And I know that we are going to be executing a contract sometime very soon, having utilized the process. And again, I don't know that we were necessarily even looking for a red line tool. I think it was something that somebody had offered to us, and hey, now let's put it out to CPC and we can see if we can do something for it. This slide might just be a little bit of filler, but the same buyer who is finalizing that red line tool contract, this is a sort of pseudo unsolicited approval of the process. I don't need to read it to you, but I had asked the buyer, hey, like, well, what's the status of this? What's going on? Any thoughts about how things are going? And, you know, without saying, tell me good things so I can present this at Cronin and really dazzle the audience. He had this really nice, short, efficient quote, but just, I think spells out very well one of the very tangible values of this type of solicitation that you can utilize in your own office. And that's the stakeholders, the people who are going to be using the product, actually can get their hands on something, try it, see if they like it, see if it fits. And it also helps move the process a lot faster. And it lets you see a product that you might not have had even knowledge it existed in some cases. I was I don't want to say taken aback, but I was actually pretty glad to see this, because again, I didn't say, hey, just put a bow on this and make it look good. I see we have a question, so stop, pause.
Pamela Nielsen asks that she would be interested in seeing your activation, navigation, and advanced analysis. And I believe that's something that we can provide if you have copies that are available at the end or after the webinar, at the conclusion.
Well, that sounds like what we're actually contracting for. I don't suspect there's any issue sharing that. I mean, I have to double check. Because I don't even know who, well, I shouldn't say, I know who the vendor is. I haven't gotten a chance to test it. I'm not a buyer, so I haven't gotten to look at it. But I can ask around, and let me actually write that down so I don't forget, because otherwise I might. Good. And I'm not sure the best way to do it, like demoing a product. Yeah, you know, do we have a phone call? Somebody's like, hey, here's us using it. I guess I can give you the information of the vendor, the name of the tool, maybe even some feedback on what that is. At the end of this, we're gonna share our email address. You're certainly free to reach out to us directly. Maybe give me some more pointed. Like I understand the comment and I'm happy to help, but it's sort of like, hey, we'd like to see this. I don't know how to show it to you, especially when I don't myself use it. And I don't think we have the finalized contract for it yet. So they're talking about some of those confidentiality things. Those might be at play. I don't know. But I'm more than happy to give you every piece of information I can about the tool that we're going to contract with. And as far as I know, I mean, we're definitely going to execute a contract. We're on the precipice. It's close. We just haven't, the ink isn't dry yet on it. Hopefully that makes sense. If not, again, something I'm always willing to talk offline with anybody who might be interested about that. But I'm going to make sure I get notes on active nav. I wrote myself a note, so as long as I don't lose that piece of paper, we should be golden. Second of three updates that I kind of wanted to provide some information on is the legal case management system. And this one's nothing maybe as revolutionary about it. If you've ever dealt with a lawyer in any capacity or a law firm, right, they have some sort of case management system. That's just, you have to. There's too much information, too many files to keep track of. This one really hit home for me here in Michigan. The State Bar of Michigan actually has what we call the Practice Management Resource Center. And I actually was on that section of the bar that operated that. And when I went out into private practice on my own, I actually went in, did some hands-on stuff, and found the case management software that I liked the best. And I could tell you right now, I was looking to go as cheap as humanly possible, but I found one that I liked a little more, or a lot more, for a little more, and was willing to go and pay for that. And essentially that's what you're doing here. Now you have to go through, again, the rigors of public procurement, but that's what happened in this particular project. The estimated value of this case management system was $550,000. It was for not the Attorney General's office, but the DHHS legal, which in the state of Michigan, the Department of Health and Human Services is by far our largest agency. I want to say they got over 7,000 employees. So they're almost twice as big as anyone else in the state. And they have a huge legal department for obvious reasons. This particular CPC received 7 different bidders. I believe it's all mostly commercial off the shelf. I'll double check that before I say with 100%, but that would make sense. That's my understanding of legal case management system. There's really not any reason to do anything custom. But as I mentioned, and it's just my doing that in the past, hands-on is critical. We got to use the product of the one we selected, at least for the initial trial, for 2 months. I believe most of DHHS legal had access to that. Paid $1,000 essentially to give it a test drive. And I know the contract itself is the final negotiations are ongoing. We're going to pay $420,000. So the value of that contract, when I say value, I mean what we're actually going to have to expend maximum is over the life of it is actually going to be about $130,000 less. The total time this project took from the initiation of the CPC until right now, I think we're sitting on less than 10 months. If we get this contract completed in the next 2 months, we're on track for what it normally takes for a complex CPC and for a complex IT solicitation, non-CPC. Excuse my misspeaking there for a second. And we're going to end up with this contract that something we had to have, but we got to test out some of the main player software and see if we like it and see how user-friendly it is. I wish some of the software that we used in our office had gone through something like that so that I could say, oh yeah, this is great. Or, oh my God, I'm wasting 10 hours a week on this horrible, horrible software. And if only they had gone with someone else, think of how much more productive we'd all be. So particularly for like COTS type products, I think the CPC is fantastic because how important is it that the people who are actually using it like the software, like the thing they're using, can navigate it quickly and easily, that it's user friendly? How much time and money does that save over its life? I don't know that you can even principally calculate that, but the value is I think clear. And so I think this is a great one. I'm really excited about it. And I think the people who are going to end up using the product are going to be very happy because it's the one they wanted. And sometimes that doesn't always happen in an RFP. The final project that I wanted to update, and we got a lot of questions about this because it was very much in its infancy, and it still is to some degree. But at the time of the annual meeting, this was brand new to me. But it's really interesting because it is a mix of commodities and services and IT. And ultimately what it is a CPC for, when I say a uniform vending system, I realized after the fact that sounds bad. It's like they're vending machines that give out MDOC uniforms. No, it's just regular vending. It's food. That's what we're talking about. Snacks, food, drinks, stuff like that. But we want to have one player in the entire state Department of Corrections. Besides simply just providing vending machines, we want them to have the same products in all the vending machines, including certain, not just candy bars and Funyuns, but some good for you stuff, because there's 3 main users that I have been advised we have, right? We have the inmate population. They are only allowed to use the cashless system. And so they have to have an IT system set up that allows them to have whatever money they have in their commissary account can be used towards the vending services. We also have vending machines in visiting areas, again, cashless, but not tied to, but you can use your credit card, you can use your debit card, you can use Apple Pay, but you can't use cash, but you're not an inmate. You are free to leave with the stuff there, but your non-cash payment is of a different type. And then they have them for the guards who can do either have accounts, have cashless payment, or can use cash. And so 3 different user groups using the same machines, and then having all of the monetary transaction data saved to one central location for whatever reasons we might need that for. But it's stunningly complicated. You think, well, vending machines, you get somebody, they pay you, they put their vending machine in, they collect the profit. Not that simple with the Department of Corrections type situation. And it's certainly the most broad-based one that we've tried in terms of a CPC, again, both in its value, I think it's a $12 million potential contract, and also in its scope, and that it really does touch on multiple different areas. They put here, to my best of my knowledge, I believe we have 27 prisons, so there's a lot of physical locations this has to be, including, again, I'm going to be besmirching the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, but some of those are pretty remote places, so you need someone that has a good geographic footprint that can provide this, can actually give you the product, can provide the vending machines themselves, and then all the IT type applications that are involved therein. It is, as I said, the most complicated one we've done, but it shows just how far you can go with a competitive proof of a CPC. That's why I'll stumble over my words if I don't say CPC, but that's, I think, the really shows you the range of the utility of this. I had it, no one's asking it now, so maybe no one cares. But when we presented this at National Conference, somebody had asked me about and damn if I can't remember the federal act, but there is a federal act that requires you to make this available to various registered blind operated entities. It's a federal act. Most states have enacted it. Michigan has enacted something very similar. And somebody asked us how we get around that. In our case, anyone who is a blind owned business rejected this opportunity, but they had the opportunity, again, because it was a competitively bid process and they got notice it's out there and they're like, yeah, we're not going to touch this. So again, you see it comports with all the laws and gives us some flexibility and hopefully some good outcomes. I think I'm running up against time anyway, but that does bring me to the end of the presentation. So pretty good timing. This is me, this is Steve, and this is our contact information if you want to take a screen capture, or I know the good people at NASPO are going to give you this presentation if you want it. So you're certainly free to reach out to us and ask us any questions you have. We are also, even though we're at time, I have some availability. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them now. Otherwise, you get to be done listening to me. Lucky you.
All right, thank you so much, Joe. That concludes today's presentation. I want to thank our presenters, Steve Davis and Joe Ernst, for the valuable information they shared today and for working with us here at NASPO to bring it to you. Thank you all for attending this webinar today. You will receive a follow-up email containing today's slides and materials. Remember, this webinar qualifies as one contact hour for your CEUs. To receive your certificate, simply fill out the survey in your browser window once you've exited the webinar. This webinar has been recorded and will be available for viewing on the NASPO YouTube page in the coming days. Questions entered into the chat and the Q&A boxes have been saved, and we will try to follow up via email for any ones not addressed during the presentation or any ones that weren't asked during the presentation. Forward them to us and we'll try to get them followed up as well. Don't forget to check out the upcoming webinars and other great events at NASPO.org. Thank you again to our wonderful presentations, and thank you to our guests. Have a wonderful day, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.